Well, welcome back to the Discovery Doc podcast. I'm here with your host,
Dr. CeCe, functional medicine nurse practitioner, self-proclaimed toxin tamer, and 𝐇𝐞𝐲 mama, and my co-host.
I'm Annah 𝘞𝐞𝐲, your medical mystery overachiever and discovery liaison. And today we're going to continue our conversation on this episode about the gut biome.
Biodome.
Yes. Okay. So I showed her, she was like, I need to watch that movie. That seems hilarious. And that is an exact representation of what we were talking about. So if you go back to 1996 and you remember watching that movie, then that's exactly what happens is when you let things in that aren't supposed to be there, create chaos. And they will.
Did you just say this? She showed me the trailer like 10 minutes ago. And I was like, oh my gosh, I need to watch this movie. It looks so good. I love it.
It's good.
But yeah, we talked quite a lot about the gut microbiome, the basics, what it is, what it does. So if you didn't, I would really encourage you guys to go back and listen to that episode, because our whole month this month is about gut health, and it's really going to build off of those basics. So we want you guys, when these experts come on and we have these more in-depth conversations, we want you guys to understand the basics so then you can better understand what they're talking about.
Right.
Yes.
Yeah. And also, if your littles come up to you and tell you that they have a tummy ache and they don't hold right here, right under their ribs, their stomach doesn't hurt. If they're holding down here in their intestines, their gut hurts. Their intestines hurt, and they're probably gas.
And there's a big difference there. Yeah. But so setting kind of those baseline or basics with the gut microbiome last episode. Now I want to venture a little bit further into what issues can be caused from an issue within your gut microbiome, or what diseases or things like that are correlated with a gut microbiome that isn't as optimal as it should be. And there is quite a laundry list.
And are these acute or chronic or both?
Both. Yes, they can absolutely be both, because, well, I'll answer that question a little bit, but they can absolutely be both. Because if you take something like the first one, which is infections are these bad guys, these invasive pathogens that kind of either temporarily or on the chronic side cause issues within the gut lining. And that's where then we get symptoms from. So they can cause things like acute diarrhea, but it can also cause things like chronic inflammation. And so and additionally, on terms of the chronic side, more of like the toxic damage to your gut lining, which then
leads to Crohn's and kind of all of that.
IBS, IBD, all of that. Some types of those pathogens even kind of invade your gut barrier, threatening to escape more so into the bloodstream, causing more of a systemic issue.
Right. And your blood doesn't really like to have junk in it.
No, it does not. And all of that dysbiosis leads to a weakening of your gut's defenses, where most of our immune system lives. So then we have weakened defenses, those pathogens are there, and now they're just overgrowing and breeding. And to your point, yes, like Crohn's, IBS, IBD, which I'll touch on a little bit more before, or a little bit. But all of those, when I have those patients come to me, every single one of them, I find some sort of infection somewhere. And it's about the route. You have to look at different routes. And I'm going to stop there, because I'm not going down a rabbit hole until my notes tell me to go down that rabbit hole.
Okay. We have a lot. Again, this is going to be information and description heavy, definition heavy, just so that you understand all of the things that we talk about when our experts come on and we do those interviews. So you have a baseline to know, oh, I know what this means. I know what symbiosis and dysbiosis. I know what CNA is, or CNS. Yeah.
I was like, what's CNS?
I don't know. CNS. So all of those, all those things. Central nervous attitude. We're going to stay positive.
Hey, there we go. Wow, that was quick. You're one of those people that, did you guys have to do theater in high school, and you like pass the ball to someone and you have to come up with like a quick fact? You're one of those people that can do that.
Oh, if you play trivia or monikers, or a game where you have to think like that, I need to be on your team.
Okay,
that is my G.
You put it
my jam.
Okay, let's say that it's like, okay, Annah 𝘞𝐞𝐲 has the ball and she's throwing it to CeCe, and CeCe has to name an animal that starts with C, and she throws it at me and I have 30 seconds. I'll be like, kangaroo. Nope, that's okay.
Cheetah, chameleon. Well, chameleon's not an animal, it's a reptile.
I do that and I panic and then I throw it back. And then in my head, I'm like, oh,
All the
cat.
things.
Yep. This is the most easy one. Cat. That's me. You're like cat, cheetah.
If my Swiss cheese brain is firing on all cylinders, if it's not, there are things that I cannot remember for the life of me. So it goes both ways.
Both ways.
I like playing games. We like game night.
So do we. Another big one that people kind of obsess about is SIBO. Everyone pronounces it differently, but small intestinal bacteria overgrowth. Basically, it's dysbiosis. It's a fancy word for dysbiosis. A bad bacteria outweighs the good bacteria. It means that certain types of bad bacteria are overgrown, and they're using too many resources that your good bacteria should be using. And they're producing too many children, too many byproducts that are then toxic towards your immune system or towards your gut lining. And they settle where they shouldn't belong. So that's a big one that can cause chronic symptoms for sure and not acute symptoms. Another one is IBD, or inflammatory bowel disease. IBD is basically, there's like this little reign king, which is IBD. And that's a collection of different autoimmune conditions that includes things like ulcerative colitis, microscopic colitis, Crohn's, etc.
So what's the difference between, because I've heard IBD, I've also heard IBS. Are they the same thing or are they different?
Oh, controversial statement coming. Both are dumb diagnoses. I'm sorry, they're dumb. So IBD is inflammatory bowel disease, which means that you have shown these symptoms over a chronic period of time of inflammation within your bowels. IBS, or irritable bowel syndrome, is like, oh, it's more of an acute thing we're not labeling as quite a chronic thing yet, but you still have the inflammatory markers and you still have lots of diarrhea. It just kind of comes and goes. Both are names of symptoms. That's how I feel.
Okay.
And yeah.
So syndrome is not actually a thing. It's a precursor to one of like ulcerative colitis.
Ulcerative colitis is very different. Ulcerative colitis is where you have had some of these symptoms like the chronic diarrhea or inflammation, etc. And over time, that's created ulcers.
Okay.
Yes, within your GI tract. A lot of those people will also suffer from pretty intense acid reflux, which also contributes to those ulcerations.
Okay.
So honestly, they all come together because they are rooted in an inflammatory response within your gut.
Yeah.
And so hold that thought. Last one, because I think this is not last one, there's so many, but another big one that I just want to touch on is something like atherosclerosis, because this is, I think, less known about how the GI tract can impact our heart health or our vascular system. And the less desirable, I feel bad calling them less desirable microbes.
We don't want any of the bad ones.
Yeah, really greatly increase your cardiovascular risk by producing something called TMAO. And that TMAO can build up. Do not ask me to say that word. I'm not doing it. Go ahead.
Can I say it?
Yes.
Trimethylamine.
Trimethylamine and oxide. I just didn't want to put on the spot and had to say it because I don't like big words. Okay, everyone knows this about me.
I like big words because I say them wrong and I make up other
like when you say them wrong, but I just don't like this. Give me the acronym. I'm fine with that. TMAO. Okay. But that byproduct is kind of a toxic byproduct, and it builds up in your arteries. That contributes then to the hardening of those arteries.
So it's a hardening of the arteries, not a plaque buildup.
Exactly.
Okay.
Exactly.
There's a difference.
There is a difference. But even so, that increases your risk of certain cardiovascular events, right? So I think that's a huge one, because I think when you think about gut health, not a lot of people think about hardening of your arteries.
Yeah, I wouldn't.
Right? Yeah. Do you? I do, but I'm a nerd. Other conditions that I find that can be directly related, or that just in literature are directly correlated, correlated with gut dysbiosis, I should say, are things like allergies, eczema, asthma, anxiety, depression, different mood disorders, chronic fatigue, fatty liver, which go back and listen to our first episode. It kind of explains why that would occur with the relationship between the gut and the liver. Neurodegenerative diseases, that's a big one. Things like MS, rheumatoid arthritis, more autoimmune conditions, and several types of cancer. So that I want to say that and kind of keep it there for a second, because that's a ton of chronic issues. And it's not to say that our gut is the only contributing factor, but it can be a massive contributing factor that I feel is often overlooked, especially in conventional medicine. Because if you have a neurodegenerative disease, let's say, you're not going to a GI doctor. They're keeping you within their realm. And so, like, again, all the systems are just separated in conventional medicine.
And they shouldn't be. And that's when misdiagnosis happens. So I have another friend of mine that has Lyme, and his doctor didn't know that he had Lyme and thought he had Crohn's because he had all the Lyme symptoms of messed up GI. So they removed
all the Crohn's
symptoms. They removed part of his colon. Didn't have to, because he didn't have Crohn's. He had Borrelia burgdorferi. He had burgers and fries.
Oh, God.
So he went through all of this mess, and he and I are sharing war stories and doing all the things. And again, he was on antibiotics for tearing up his gut of what he had left and just all of things. So, but they're thriving now. They just had a baby, got married, had a baby. So, but again, why it is so important to look at the body as a whole system.
Yes.
That they could have saved a surgery. Right. Yeah. And now he's missing part of his colon.
We don't need to take body parts if they don't need to be taken. It drives me crazy. Gallbladders are taken all the time for no reason. And then you're left with somebody who can't digest salad for the rest of their life. Yeah. Their foods, because you get rid of that good bile. It's just body parts are taken too easily, y'all.
Yeah. So if you're in a space where you are experiencing some of these symptoms or the list of things that we've talked about, reach out to her functional medicine office and get in to see her or your local functional medicine doctor. Get someone to look at the entire picture. And if they look at the entire picture and they don't put the puzzle pieces together to fix it, then okay, at least you tried, but you're going to get more information having someone look at everything and how it affects and is tied together.
And understanding your body. I get so many people, to me, when I run like what I consider very minimal LabCorp or just labs in general, patients will sit there and be like, wow, I've never seen this about myself. I've never seen this information. So even if it's just for the fact of understanding your body at a deeper level and what's going on with your body, because conventional medicine labs are saved for a problem. But why? Why not use them to see what your body is actually doing and where it's thriving and where it's doing great? And Annah Kate's talked about this in the past, but also having your baseline and understanding in the future if that baseline is changing. Well, now you know, right? It's not, you're not like, oh, I've never seen that before, so I have no idea what that is. Bro, it's your body.
Yeah, it's your numbers, and the trajectory and history of your numbers is far more important than what they are
comparing you to the reference range.
Yeah, that's the words.
I knew
reference range.
This guy.
This guy.
Yeah.
And then also, putting it back in your binder. Like, I hope nobody has a binder.
I do too.
Like me. Yes. But you should have a binder for everybody in your family of things that come, because it is so hard to remember, especially if someone turns chronic for whatever reason, that this is the year that this happened. This is the doctor that we saw. This is the event that happened or occurred.
But also just for prevention. There doesn't need to be a problem, but why not use these laboratories as a means to prevent yourself from getting somewhere? And you would only know that if you had the information. And so it drives me crazy when patients are like, and again, it's very basic stuff to me, but my very basic is much more comprehensive than somebody else's. And I'm like, wow, we should know this about our bodies. Like, this should be information that we see. Maybe just on a yearly basis or something.
Right. And even in episode 22, we talked about cholesterol and HDL and LDL. So if you're one that wants to track that, that's a good one to have run every year at I mean, I'm sure that there's a specific time that
Yeah, do it fasting in the morning.
It's beneficial to do that. So, and then that's your number. So do you really have high cholesterol, or is your HDL and LDL at a great ratio and yours just tends to track at a different percentage? Like, if you don't know that, allopathic doctors are going to say, here's a statin and take this drug and bye. That doesn't fix the
problem.
And there may not even be a problem to fix.
Right. So exactly.
I digest.
We do this all the time. We have our notes and we sway.
Hey, it's real.
It is real. Okay. So
what can we do?
What can we do? Yes, we don't want to become fearful of everything that I just named, but do know that if you struggle or your child struggles for anything that we did name, that there could definitely be a gut component to it that could relieve some of the symptoms, or that could kind of put those symptoms on hold for good. So yes, what can we do? I think that the biggest factor here, the most important factor, is that your microbiome is like a fingerprint. It's unique to you and only you. And we inherit kind of our first microbes, remember those good bacteria, during actually, if our mom gave birth to us vaginally, that's our first introduction to the good microbes.
Because we're covered in meconium.
And the vaginal canal.
Yes.
Like when you go through the vaginal canal has good gut or good microbes in there.
Just like we talked about the poop, it takes enough time and it deposits and collects things along the way.
So baby collects. That's okay. So baby collects them. So that's why there's research between C-section babies and vaginal births that the C-section babies aren't exposed to those good microbes right off the bat, which is okay. C-sections are needed sometimes. But it's just a fact
for the health of baby and mom and survival rate of baby and mom. It's important.
The second kind of place where we get exposed to it is through breastfeeding. Some women obviously can't breastfeed, but the ones who can are blessed and fortunate too. That is giving baby all those good microbes and helping to build up the baby's immune defenses by producing those microbes, transmitting them over, and helping to develop the gut microbiome of the baby. The first, and then later in life, obviously, like environmental toxins or just environments in general, or what we eat, then alters the microbiome. So that's why everyone is so different. Everyone's is so unique, because we don't all eat the same. We aren't all exposed to the same things. We all aren't born the same way.
Right.
And we all aren't, even like if you go to supplements, we all aren't given the same supplements. So everyone's looks very, very different, which is a big fact. And the things that we're exposed to can either benefit that microbiome or be harmful to a microbiome. I said this in our last episode, but again, just crucial. The first 2 to 3 years of life is the most critical for developing your gut microbiome for life. Because by 2 to 3 years of age, that kid has developed the microbiome that they are going to continue on through adulthood with. Think about that.
Very cool.
Yeah. Think about that. They have gradually developed towards an adult microbiota by 3 years of age. Crazy. That means that within those first 2 to 3 years of life, it is critical to focus on gut health to set this child up for success throughout their entire life.
So it's not only for moms that breastfeed, because I know you breastfeed, that it is the diversity and microbiome and gut biome of your diet, because you're creating food for baby. Because, so here's a question: how long do you breastfeed, like until they start getting teeth, milk? I mean, every baby's different, every mom's different. Like it's just a question for me.
In a perfect world, and no judgment here because I did not make it this long. In a perfect world, because that gut microbiome is developing until 2 to 3, we would be breastfeeding until 2 to 3.
And maybe not every meal, but have it part of the process. So you're introduced when they get their teeth.
Obviously eating food by that point.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay.
So they're, in terms of liquid consumption, that would be optimal. Now, there are some women out there who are amazing and can do it, and that's impeccable. I think with Jada, I got to maybe like 14 months, and it was my time. I just felt it, it was my time to stop. Other moms, it's 2 months, you know, but in a perfect world, if we're talking about just how breastfeeding impacts the gut microbiome, yeah, it would be for that full 2 to 3 years so that you are supporting the gut microbiome. Now, if we can't, then, and this is good segue, if we can't, or just for extra support, that is why around 6 months or so, 6 to 12 months, depending on the patient, depending on their history, depending on what they're going through, I always recommend bringing in something like Mega IgG, because Mega, especially if moms are unable to breastfeed or don't want to breastfeed, again, never any judgment there. Then I will come in at a safe time and say, okay, we aren't getting those good immunoglobulins from mom, which is helping to boost up the immune system, but also helping to develop that gut diversity. So let's take a very safe supplement and let's implement that. And for some kiddos, it's around 6 months. For some kiddos, it's around a year. But Mega IgG, I like them by Microbiome Labs. I use them quite a bit because people get the words colostrum and immunoglobulins mixed up.
Yeah, those are two different words.
They're two different things. So colostrum is the gooey goodness that comes from mom's breast milk. And that is rich with something called immunoglobulins. And when you go to supplement with colostrum, it has dairy components, because we can't take a human breast milk and take the immunoglobulins from it and then give it in a supplement form. So they often derive it from cow, from bovine serum or cow blood. And when they do that, a lot of these companies, they leave the dairy component, which gives us colostrum. Well, in my patient population, I'm not messing with the chance that this baby has a dairy allergy. Yes, because most of us do. So I would rather go to a company that does not contain any traces of dairy. And that's just the only reason why I use Mega IgG by Microbiome Labs, because it's that highly concentrated immunoglobulin without the dairy component that supports the baby's immunity, also supports the gut diversity and gut health, and helps to kind of balance the teeter-totter between giving the baby good things and protecting it against yuckies.
So what's the delivery method?
Oh,
for a 6-month-old?
So it's a powder. And if mom is breastfeeding and baby has not taken a bottle, then you just need, like a little bit amount. Like there's a scooper that comes with it, and it could be a fifth of that scooper. And so if baby hasn't had a bottle, there's 2 ways to. One, you can take a little syringe and express a little bit of breast milk, and then fill it up with a syringe. Like a milliliter, it doesn't have to be anything big. And then mix a little bit of that powder, shake up the syringe, squirt in baby's mouth. The 2 is some women just put the powder right on their nipple and then latch the baby on. Obviously, if they're taking a bottle, if let's say you're pumping milk and putting in a bottle, or if they're formula fed, then you just put in their bottle once a day and it dissolves. Easy peasy. Shake it up, give it, super easy.
Awesome.
Yeah, it's really, really great stuff. And the other thing to start around that age is a good probiotic.
Yeah.
Helping to, diversify and enrich and, water our garden that we talked about.
Yeah.
And I always educate patients on the rotation through that and certain ones. So in infancy, there's a couple, and I have no disclaimer, I have no relationships with any of these. So this is just literally what I recommend. But there's some good ones for infants that are powders. There's Probiotic Infant by Seeking Health. There is Therabiotic Infant by Clear Labs. There is, BioRay, I'd save BioRay for a little bit later, like around 12 months. There's BioRay has a MDF tummy, I think it's what it's called, that's liquid, but I'd like to save that for a little bit later, around 12 months. There's a bunch of good ones. That Smidge has an infant one. And so just rotate through those, pick one per month and rotate through. And the other thing is, as kids start to, and this is assuming we can from the start, right? And there's always time to make these adjustments later on if we haven't, but from the start, if you're about to have a baby, listen up, because it's just much easier to do this from the get-go.
Did you take probiotics as a kid? I know your mom was.
No.
Yeah. My mom was taking barley greens. So she's been taking her greens forever. And she would give us the powder like when we were in like middle school and high school. We hated doing it, but we did it because she told us to. But we never took probiotics as little kids.
Yeah.
Like, I don't remember.
But and my mom says this all the time. She's like, you didn't do all this when you were a kid. But my defense to that, or argument to that, is that if we are talking about 30 years ago, do you know how much more rich the soil was in nutrients?
Yeah.
Do you know how much more rich our food was in nutrients?
Oh yeah, you have to eat 30 oranges to get the same vitamin C content of
one orange
50 years ago.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So that is massive. Also, things that, like, there were no genetically modified foods 30 years ago. You know what I mean? So it's apples and oranges to compare then versus now. It really is. But something else that we focused on with our kids, and that's really, really important for just future gut health, is diversity in the diet from the start, from the absolute start. We tend to be creatures of habit, and we go to grab the same foods over and over and over again. And that's what the convenience of grocery stores has given us. You can get foods all year round, no matter what. And that then, when we eat the same food over and over and over again, it increases our likelihood of things like food sensitivities and food allergies. We're not meant and designed to eat the same food over and over and over again. We're meant and designed to eat what is in season.
Yeah.
So that's another reason I love to go to local farmers markets and support local just shops in terms of produce, because they only have
what's being grown right now.
Yeah. And it forces you to kind of rotate through things. And you can still have a routine, because I know as busy parents or busy working humans, even if you don't have kids and you work and you're on the go, then for yourself, you can still have a routine within your week, but diversify it. So you can have the same breakfast Monday, Wednesday, Saturday, you know, and then have a different breakfast Tuesday, Thursday, Sunday. Like, you can still kind of routine it like that, where you're not as overwhelmed by choosing different things every single day. But how we kind of do it is by grocery shopping. So we have to go to the store. I don't want to say how many times in a week. We probably go to the store 3 times a week.
But you buy lots of fresh stuff as well. So you eat it, and then it doesn't go to waste. So when it gets replenished, you can go buy fresh stuff again. So and that's okay.
There's 5 of us, so it goes fast. But what we do 1 bigger trip, and then 2 like, oh, we're out of this and this trips throughout the week. But what I do is I'm intentional on what I'm buying, so that when I get home, I don't have to think about it. So I do that with fruit. For example, let's say that my big shopping trip on Monday, we get bananas, strawberries, and plums. Okay, cool. Then the next time I go and get fruit, I'm getting
something else:
blackberries, blueberries, and apples. You know, and I diversify it that way. And I do the same thing with vegetables. I do the same thing with kids' snacks. I do the same thing with what my kids have as their morning drink, because then it is creating a diversity amongst my kids to be just open to trying new foods. And then it takes the guesswork out for everybody in the family, where, okay, this is what we have in our fridge. This is what we have in our pantry. We don't have to think about, oh, wait, have I had, you know, this same breakfast every single day this week? Do I need to change it? You're forced to change it.
Right.
You know,
and you have really good eaters.
We have very good eaters, but I will say it's because from the get-go, they were eating like pro athletes. Like, my husband was always in training camp. And so at, 9 months old, they're eating sweet potatoes and avocado and scrambled eggs. And we just never stopped that.
Right.
And so their palates are geared towards really nutrient dense foods. They don't reject anything. They will be willing to try everything. And even as like Ava's gotten older and she's surrounded by people, more candy and things like that, she's still making really good decisions.
Right.
And we still let her have those things every once in a while, but she doesn't go towards, like, she's not someone who's going to crave or reject or like deny or fight us on eating healthier foods, because we started that. That was our rule as a household. But the point being there is, if you diversify what they're exposed to from the get-go, you're diversifying their gut microbiome, and you're helping to set up not only their food habits and their eating habits, but also their GI tract for success in the future.
Right.
And it's never too late. If that's something, you guys can work on that at any point in life. food diversity. We do the same thing with our protein sources. We cycle through chicken and turkey and salmon and mahi, and even just like plant-based like chickpeas and things like that. We cycle through, and red meat as well. And it's just, once you get used to it, it's fine.
Yeah,
it's easy.
Well, it's just like we talked about on our Halloween episode of real candy tastes better than the highly processed stuff, because the highly processed stuff tastes like plastic. If you've gone to a more natural and reducing all of those toxins and overconsumption, then they just taste different. So the same thing with
totally tastes different,
with all of this, and also with having your kids have different choices and them being really good eaters. They're deciding of whether they're hungry or if they just want the junk. Because if it's just junk food and they won't eat anything else, they're not really hungry.
Right. Exactly.
Like, if you're really hungry, you'll eat more salad, or you'll eat more fruit, or whatever it is. But if that's the only option, so that may be kind of a new thing to introduce if you want to diversify,
right,
and just get them involved. Hey, we're going to go to the grocery store and we're going to pick an orange vegetable. What orange vegetable do you want? And then the next week you do a green. So eat the rainbow, not a bag of Skittles. You can get giggles, but but go through and get them involved and say, hey, let's find a recipe, because they want to do it and they want to learn the stuff, and they're more likely involved and want to try things if they've had all the things involved.
Right, exactly. And another good point there is from the get-go, helping children understand that food is a nutrient.
Yes.
And that kind of is, if you break down why food diversity is so important, it's because those nutrients, what we talked about last episode, is that the different microbes in your GI tract, they need different nutrients to thrive. And so if we're constantly just feeding one side and not, shedding light or watering the other side, then we're going to create an imbalance. And so for our kids, what I did and continue to do is I ask questions. I say, okay, who knows what carrots are good for? Who knows what broccoli is good for? Who knows what sweet potatoes are good for? And it makes them really excited to know the answer or to guess the answer. But then it also teaches them that, hey, we are consuming this for a purpose, and it's not strictly for pleasure.
Right.
Obviously, they have foods that are strictly for pleasure. Their entire treat box is for pleasure. They get that too. But I want them to know that throughout the day, the bulk of what we are eating is for a purpose. And society today has completely lost that mentality. It is a pleasure, just absolutely like on the go society when it comes to food, instead of viewing food as a necessity to fuel your body with the appropriate nutrients.
Right. If you're after that convenience, at least be crunchy convenient. So that's something that she and I both share. We want to make the best choices possible. And maybe that's prepping at home when we're going to go out and there's games, or we're going to be like on a road trip or whatever it is. Bring the snacks that are good for you. So like I went on a road trip recently and I had my gluten-free pretzels and I had cheese and I had my Archer sticks. Like, and then it's just fruit.
The bars.
Yeah, that's all. That was, I think, well, that's all.
That's it.
That's it. Yeah.
That's it.
Yeah. So I had something sweet, so I didn't have to stop and, because on the road or when you're traveling, you kind of want to have junk food.
Oh yeah. And you get super hungry and over hungry, and then you stop, at a gas station, and then you can't find anything. And so we do the same thing. We bring grocery bags worth of snacks. Yes. And then we stop for little like walk breaks or play breaks or whatever, but we have all the food that we need. We even make sandwiches ahead of time. And it works out.
Now, a word from our sponsor.
With a looming flu season upon us, prevention is key. Supporting your immune and gut health every day is crucial. That's why I trust Stellar Biotics for daily immune and gut health support. With 20 years of science behind their metabiotic and probiotics, Stellar Biotics produces all-natural supplements that are proven safe and effective for everyone in your family: children, nursing mothers, and even pets. I trust them for my family's immune and gut health support, and I hope you consider them for yours. Learn more at stellarbiotics.com and use coupon code Dr. CeCe10 to get 10% off your purchase today. The other thing that is, and you started talking about this last episode, and I was like, hold your horses. We're not talking about
Whoa,
this right
Della.
now. Yes. Are something else that we can be very protective of with kids, but also with adults in general, is avoiding antibiotic overuse.
Oh, that bubblegum antibiotic when we were little. Dude, my mom had to like hide it because I would want to go in and take an extra dose because it tastes so good.
It tastes so good. But if we take, for example, let's take ear infections for kids. When it comes to kids, acute ear infections are the most likely cause that your kid will get or receive in antibiotics. But 80%, 80% of ear infections in kids would resolve without antibiotics. So that means out of all those kids who are getting the antibiotics, only really 20% need antibiotics to recover. Think about that. Think about it. So again, if antibiotics are truly needed for a kid or for an adult, for you, yes, they can be life-saving. Absolutely. I have nothing against them in that sense whatsoever. They are just so misused and overused, and that is destroying your good, healthy microbiome.
Right.
And for someone like Annah Kate over here, who was put on doxycycline for months and months and months and months at a time, you can imagine then what that did to her gut health specifically. So avoiding unnecessary antibiotic use is extremely important, and especially within those first 2 to 3 years of a kid's life, especially important then, because like we said, that is the most kind of dramatic and critical time period to developing and fostering and watering and feeding their microbiome. So what I always suggest is, and this is for anybody, no matter the age, is if an antibiotic is needed, we absolutely need 2 things. We need to double up on our good bacteria. So our good probiotics, you can take your normal kind of whatever you take on a daily basis. Some of those we mentioned for kids earlier are totally fine in the morning, or for infants in the morning. And then you really want a spore-based one at night.
Okay.
So we talked earlier about Saccharomyces boulardii, kind of that's stronger, and it withstands the acidity of the stomach, gets to the small intestine where it releases more of those endotoxins. We want something a little bit stronger at night. For a kid, this might be like 1/4 of a capsule. For an adult, take that whole thing. If you know antibiotics are coming up in your future, you start taking that and prepping your gut like a week before.
Okay.
Most of us don't know, right? Most of it's like an acute thing where all of a sudden you're on an antibiotic. Start while you're on that antibiotic and continue. I tell my patients at least 2 weeks. In a perfect world, I would like 4 weeks. After, depending on the length of time that you had to take that antibiotic.
Okay.
So keep going afterwards. That is doing 2 things. It's helping to replenish the good. And then the Saccharomyces boulardii is helping to keep the bad guys at bay. The other side is Candida. You mentioned this earlier.
Oh, Candida and I go way backward.
Yes. Candida is a fungus.
He's not really fun.
He's not fun. And he overgrows when he's given opportunity. I always do this, and I say this to patients, it's always a guy. I'm so sexist when it comes to GI issues. Like literally when I'm going through a GI map with a patient, I'm like, okay, he is doing this, and these guys, and I have to stop myself and be like, I'm sorry. So there's no path.
Right. Well, it's because it's a fungus. It's a fungi.
It's a fungi.
So that's where the guy part comes from. We're not whatever its orientation is, we just don't want it. It's no fun.
Yes. So that, like, Candida is something that we can have a baseline of, and it can be chilling and be just fine. But when it's given opportunity and it can overgrow, now we can have, even within the GI tract, we can have increased bloating, we can have increased reactivities to food, we can have constipation. If it becomes more systemic, we can have headaches, migraines, fatigue, joint pain, just from Candida becoming more systemic, coming out of the gut and into the blood.
Right.
So when we're given antibiotics and we suppress the good bacteria, we're allowing anything that's opportunistic or any of those bad guys a chance to overgrow.
Right.
Candida is one of the big ones there. And so I always like, if you're on antibiotics, adult or kid, I always like to throw in something for Candida to help keep it at bay. This can be as conventional, even though I would compound it. I never get nystatin from a normal pharmacy. I'm not going to say why, but compounding is just clean. There's no added ingredients. It's a fatty acid in nystatin, and that's it.
We take that at night.
Yeah. So you actually don't want to take it with Saccharomyces boulardii.
Good to know.
You want to take it away from Saccharomyces boulardii because they kind of fight. They kind of eat each other. So take it in the morning with your other probiotic.
Okay.
So it can be compounded nystatin, or if you want to stay very natural instead, it can be things like oil of oregano, MCT oil, caprylic acid. Any of those are awesome natural antifungals that help to keep Candida more at bay. So those are my rules for if someone is absolutely needs to go on an antibiotic.
Right. And you'll always have Candida. Like that's a normal thing that lives in your body. It's not, you're not going to eliminate it forever. We just don't want the overgrowth, because the overgrowth causes problems.
Exactly.
It's one we need. It's beneficial when it's doing its thing
at a certain level.
At a certain level, if it gets overgrown, and that's when you crave sugars. And because usually when you're sick, what are you doing? You're laying on the couch, resting and recovering, and eating a bunch of junk food. even if it's healthy junk food, it's typically higher in sugar sometimes. So
feeding that candy eaters.
Yeah,
that's what I call them.
Candy eaters.
Oh my gosh, that was good. The other thing is, just to be realistic, we are exposed to things all the time throughout life. We're exposed to things. So for kids, it depends on the age. So take this with a grain of salt. This is not medical advice, but with adults, or just me personally, I like to go through things like a little Candida or parasite work. I'm not going to call it a true cleanse. I think that word gets overused, and those can be extremely harsh on the body sometimes. If not done right and done at the appropriate time, it can actually make us feel worse sometimes. So I like to say little Candida or parasitic work, maybe a couple times per year. If you're overall healthy, have no chronic issues, just to maintain your gut microbiome and maintain the beneficial aspect of it, and anything that might be kind of overgrowing or overbreeding, we're telling it to sit down. So this can be, in terms of something like Candida, it can be something as simple as a good binding agent. I personally like to use GI Detox Plus, but that's a combination of ingredients that some people don't do well with. So you can do just activated charcoal or bentonite clay or zeolite clay, something like that, to help kind of group up or bind up those fungi balls.
Yes, those fungi.
And then you poop them out, you excrete them more easily, or you sweat them out or urinate them out more easily. In addition to that, some good kind of natural agents alongside the binding agent are your oil of oregano, berberine, caprylic is really good, pau d'arco is really good, rosemary leaf. There's certain products out there that combine all of those, that you can grab even from Sprouts or your local supplement store. That you take those two for a good month, and you tell that bad boy to sit down.
And we want the body to release those from where they shouldn't be, and then with binding agent, rip them all up, put a lasso around them and get them out of the body. Because otherwise, if you just release them and don't have that binding agent, then they get reabsorbed, and we don't do anything with them. So we've wasted the release protocol on not having the binders to round them up and the paddy wagon to get them out of town.
And the release of it can also cause more symptoms. So if you're releasing them into the bloodstream and not getting them out, now you have an uptick in certain symptoms that you didn't have before, because you pissed off the fungi, you made them mad, and you're not excreting him.
Would that be a Herxheimer reaction?
Yeah, because a Herxheimer reaction is just when your immune system recognizes something that it needs to go fight, and something that's foreign. And our immune system pays attention to that, and it goes, oh, what is going on over there? I have to intervene. So now I'm going to intervene. And now my good immune system is attacking those little fungal balls. And now we become symptomatic from that interaction.
And we don't want our body to hurt. I know a big thing, especially several years ago, going through all the Lyme, we wanted to get the Lyme out and do the things. And so it was almost encouraged in the community that Herx makes you feel better. but don't. It's not a thing. Like,
Yeah.
don't just.
It just means that you're pushing your body too far than it's ready to go. And that's really important. And that's why I said earlier, like those parasitic cleanses or candida cleanses, sometimes they aren't appropriate for people because it's too much information coming in and your body can't process it fast enough to get out. And now we have those ☺ reactions, or we feel worse. And it's your body, that's information your body's telling you that, hey, slow down. I'm not ready. I need to build back up.
Right.
And that overload, and I remember feeling that too, where like I would go on this herbal protocol back before I did SOT for Lyme, and I felt terrible, but I was like, oh, this means it's working. Like it's getting things out. So I just need to chug through. And no, it did absolutely nothing because my body was not ready to receive that information.
Right.
It's too much. For parasites, I actually like a different binding agent. I really like Mimosa pudica. It helps to bind parasites a little bit better than like activated charcoal bentonite clay. Do not, whatever you want to say, don't say it.
It's not the mimosa that I'm thinking of.
It's not. No, it's not the fun mimosas that I can't have currently. But I like Mimosa pudica, and anything like natural agents. When we talk about natural agents with parasites, we like herbal extracts that have things like black walnut and wormwood and olive leaf and fennel seed and clove and all of that. Those herbal extracts are very, very strong. So just caution with that as well. For kids, it could look like just some good biocidin. That's a full spectrum liquid for a month if they're healthy. That's a great natural kind of anti-parasitic and antifungal GI specific herbal extract that's really gentle. That's a good one. The other thing that I wanted to touch on is like certain things that I think get overlooked. Like we touched on a few of disorders or diseases or symptoms that can be impacted by your gut health. And there's a few of them that drive me crazy that I want to touch on a little bit more. One is just if your kid is chronically constipated, because I had, get this.
Backed up or too much?
Backed up.
Okay.
Yeah, backed. Well, for right now, backed up. I just had a friend tell me this story about her 3-year-old niece who suffers from a genetic condition, but also chronic constipation at 3 years old. Okay, chronically constipated to the point where this poor baby was just in the ER. And they had to admit her because she was so constipated. And the mom followed up with the pediatrician after that hospital admission. And you know what the pediatrician said? Do you know what the pediatrician said? She said to Google how common it is for 3-year-olds to be constipated.
Why is the pediatrician?
What?
Don't think she should see that pediatrician anymore.
And then she was given Miralax for 6 months. Okay. I have so many issues here.
Okay. Adults should not be taking Miralax. Period.
Yeah.
I'm just going to say, okay. So here's the thing with those types of things. If you take something to tell your body to loosen up and do things, then your body doesn't learn how to do it.
Exactly.
And then that creates an even bigger problem because, oh, well, if mom's just going to do my homework for me, I don't have to learn anything.
You get lazy. Your body gets lazy.
Your body unlearns how to move things through your system. So that's all I'm gonna say on that one.
Not to mention, and that's with adults, not to mention that if you look at the manufacturer's insert of Miralax, it actually says not intended for children and not intended for chronic use. It is intended for short-term use of constipation relief in adults. But raise your hand, listeners, if your kid was prescribed Miralax over 5 days, let's say. So many pediatricians just hand it out. Constipation? Okay, take it. Oh, they got off it. They're still constipated. Okay, take some more of it. And now we have kids who are on Miralax for a year, 2 years. And there are current kind of lawsuits going on and things that say that Miralax should come with a black box warning for neuropsychiatric disorders, because there's so much evidence that chronic use in kids has been a contributing factor to neuropsychiatric disorders.
That should not be those words should not be in the same sentence.
Right. It is wild. It is absolutely wild. So if your kid is chronically constipated, Annah K just explained it so well, that something like Miralax or a diuretic is just loosening up the poop to get it out easier, but it's not solving the underlying problem. That is not normal. It is not normal. I don't care if your pediatrician said, go to Google how common it is for kids to be constipated. It's not normal. It's not.
It may be common, but it's not normal.
No. So please seek additional help. There's always a reason why that kid is constipated. And honestly, it is one of the easiest things to figure out.
Dehydration?
If you just, definitely a common factor. If you just go to the right person who can give you the right tools, constipation is not hard. I had a patient, I think he was maybe 2 or 3 last year, where he was so constipated and had been on Miralax for so long that the pediatrician's next step was to actually go put a stent in his anus.
And a 3-year-old?
Stent in his anus. I'm sorry, what? I worked with that kid for under 4 weeks and he was pooping normally. And it's not hard. Like, it's just looking at the body a different way. And that drives me crazy. Right. It's not hard to figure out. So please see extra help. It is not normal. The other thing that gets missed a lot is eczema. When we have severe eczema, there is always a GI component. And if we think about our GI tract, histamine can be within our GI tract at a relatively high concentration, but even worse and even higher during inflammatory processes. So we have a kid with eczema, right? Let's say a kid with severe eczema. I would venture to say that 99% of the time there is a GI issue. Okay. So we have gut dysfunction, and that gut dysfunction creates an inflammatory process more globally that we kind of talked a little bit about last episode. And now there's an increase in that histamine release because the inflammation is higher.
Right.
So now when we have an increase of that histamine release, now we have increased reactivity to foods. Now we can't tolerate any foods. Now we're reacting to all these foods if new foods are being introduced. And we have then increased eczema, because there are always triggers to eczema, but they always relate back to that histamine level. So for eczema kids, I always start in the GI tract and kind of work my way out from there.
Right. Because eczema is an outside marker for an internal storm.
Yes.
And if the storm has gotten so bad that now it's creating an issue on the skin, then there's a big dysfunction there. So it's
right.
And you were telling us about a baby or a toddler that had really bad eczema, and you just cleaned up their.
I have a lot of eczema babies right now.
Yeah.
Yeah. And yes, it's always the starting point. It's one piece of the puzzle. I say that a lot. It's one piece of the puzzle, but it is a massive piece of the puzzle to clean up the GI tract in a kid or an adult with chronic eczema.
Right. Because an outside topical ointment or lotion is not going to fix that problem until you fix what's in the gut.
Exactly. And that's why parents, if you have a kid who has chronic eczema and you're giving them a steroid cream, it works for a little bit, but as soon as you stop using it, that eczema comes right on back. Why? Because it's an internal problem. And all you're doing is suppressing that outside problem. And then we take away that suppressive agent, right, it's back. So another one is pandas. You know what pandas is?
Not the cute, fuzzy Asian bear with the black and white. That's not that? Okay.
No. So pandas is pediatric autoimmune neuropsychiatric disorder associated with streptococcal infections.
Hey, I'm a strep kid.
Yeah.
I need to be proud of.
So I'm mentioning this because pandas, I think in recent years has taken, it's much more known, which I'm very thankful for. But what that means is these kiddos or adults, we have adult pandas patients as well. I don't really call it pandas anyways, because again, that's just a name of strep going haywire. So just fix it.
Yeah.
But what it looks like in kids, it's very cyclical. We can have this kid who's cool, calm, collected, and all of a sudden irritable, angry. I mean, throwing things, hitting mom, scratching mom, uncontrollable emotions, whether it's super, super heightened emotions or low, just emotional dysregulation to the finest. I tell adults this, we can have that same response. It just looks different in adults because we're trained to suppress those emotions, right? So we can hold it in a little bit better. But ultimately what that leads to, also OCD, tics, things like that are very common. The strep bacteria is not a bad bacteria per se. We come across it usually as kids, you know, that's normal. But these people who hold on to the memory of it, or where it's overgrowing in the GI tract, it's an opportunistic infection within the GI tract. If it's overgrowing there, and then it's overgrowing, so to speak, within the blood where our antibodies are now attacking it, thinking that this is a more chronic infection, that's where you get encephalitis, inflammation in the brain, and then that PANDAS diagnosis and all the emotional dysregulation that comes with it.
So how often is this misdiagnosed as on the spectrum?
Quite a bit. Yeah, quite a bit. And I think it's getting better because presentation wise is very, very different. But I would say that pretty often, even still, there's getting misdiagnoses there because PANDAS is very cyclical. You'll have a fully verbal kid who does well in school, who socializes well, who then goes from 0 to 60. I mean, within the drop of a pin.
Right. And that's because the strep is activated.
Yes, exactly.
And how is that different than strep B? Because is that the same thing? Is that different?
Different strains. Strep is a big family.
Okay. Yeah. So I have strep.
You have groupie strep.
See, I don't even know. Groupie strep. So, because I would have strep throats as a kid and all of the stuff, and as an antibody accumulator, like how do I navigate?
There's different ways that strep can become a problem.
Okay.
One is that strep species within the GI tract can be fairly normal. We have a kind of a normal baseline of it, but if it's allowed to party and activate, now we have a strep overgrowth within the GI tract, which then can impact us more systemically.
Okay.
If you had recurrent tonsillitis, strep throat as a kid, now you can become what they call a carrier of that strep antibody. To me, that's not normal either, because now we have an automatic, instead of going from the gut outward, we have an automatic immune response towards that bacteria, and you keep those antibodies, they stick around. And when those antibodies stick around more systemically and cross the blood-brain barrier and enter like more of our central nervous system, now we can have those same kind of quote PANDAS symptoms in even adults from having recurrent tonsillitis as a kid. So
sorry, I had to ask because I wanted to know.
Yeah,
because there's a difference, because you hear strep and it's a big family. It can be 15 different things. Well, which one is it?
Right. They're both very important. And here's why. If you are a strep quote carrier but you haven't had strep throat in 20 years, and those antibodies are just hanging out, they're not meant to just hang out. We can't become immune to strep. So that immune response should not be there anymore. If we have strep in the gut that's partying, it shouldn't be partying. It should be sitting down nicely at a baseline where it's not causing an issue. So the question in both of those is why? What is allowing your immune system to take this relatively normal bacteria and activate it and turn it on and have it cause a problem?
Yeah.
So even with my PANDAS kids, it is not just ever the strep. There is something underlying that's allowing it to wake up. And that can come from within your gut. It can also come from more systemically with other viruses, other bacteria, other toxic agents, whatever it may be, that's brewing in there, that's activating these followers. Strep is a follower. And so in terms of gut health specifically, what I look at with patients is, okay, why is it turned on? Why is it partying? Are there other pathogenic organisms in there that don't belong, that are there, that are turning this guy on? Or do I have to look in the blood?
Right.
So that is important to know. Food for thought. with anyone dealing with strep as a chronic problem.
Or the symptoms and you don't know what it is, and they
Right.
get tested for strep, for
Right.
pandas, ask the questions.
Yes, ask the questions. The other one, which we touched on a little bit earlier, Crohn's, IBD, IBS. They're all a result of chronic inflammation, and they all have triggers. So I love when I have IBS, IBD, Crohn's patients come to me, because the treatment is anti-inflammatories, right, to reduce the inflammation, and steroids. Okay, why? What do steroids do? Steroids suppress that immune response. So in conventional medicine, therefore, it's known that there is some sort of overactive immune response, but hey, let's throw a steroid at it to suppress it.
And not figure out what their immune response, the immune system is responding to.
Exactly. So
why? Why don't they ask that question?
I don't know. I don't understand it, because I do. And it's a big teller. It's a big teller. I've had 20-year-olds, 22-year-olds with diagnosis of Crohn's who come to me who are on either Remicade or Humira, which are very intense drugs. And they're just told they have to be on those for the rest of their lives because it's suppressing that immune response. And I'll look at them and I'll ask, okay, so since starting the Humira, have you had a Crohn's kind of outbreak, so to speak?
Flare.
Or episode or flare. And they'll be like, it's not 100% better, but it's definitely a lot better. And so I'll look at them and say, okay, why do you think that is? And it's because whatever autoimmune reaction is occurring is being told to go to sleep. Okay, so I want to find what the actual autoimmune reaction, where that's stemming from. And that's just like, I don't get it. I don't get it why that's not a normal thought process.
Because if we could fix the immune disruptor, we wouldn't have to put a Band-Aid on it that doesn't really actually fix the problem, and all the side effects make it worse. And then we have a miserable person that doesn't know what their body's telling them because everything hurts.
Yes. And there's always, always, always a trigger. So if you know somebody or have somebody who suffers from Crohn's, IBS, IBD, any of those, there is always a trigger, whether it's, like we've said, fungus, viral, bacterial, maybe some sort of food, intolerance that you don't even know that you have. And it's misdiagnosed because all those things can produce inflammation within the GI tract.
Right.
But please know that there's always something that can be done, always. And you can go from a place of being on that steroid long term to kind of taper it off and not needing it. And to what I tell my patients is, realistically, we can kind of heal your GI tract up, find the problem, heal the GI tract up. But if you go on vacation and you eat all the things that you haven't had in years that are triggers for you, then you might have a flare. And then we have to kind of do some remediation and backtrack. But that is so much better of a place than having to rely on a drug for the rest of your life at 20 years old. Right. So food for thought. I think we'll get into a lot more of those and kind of the nitty-gritty aspects of gut health and maintenance and all of that with some of our experts. So I think we'll wrap it up there.
Mm-hmm.
And our next episode, we will have a fun one. It's not just Thanksgiving, and kind of how gut health wraps in all things Thanksgiving.
Yeah. So I'm actually gonna, I'll say it.
Just thinking.
I'll say it in the real world. So if you did this for us for our episode that will actually air on Thanksgiving, you'll get shout outs there, because I have an idea for our Thursday episode that week. So because our next episode that we're going to actually talk about Thanksgiving will come out a couple of weeks before Thanksgiving. Yeah. So I'm just putting this out there.
Ignore everything she just said.
No, don't. I'm just already thanking you in advance. So, because some things are going to come your way. So also, yeah, if you're learning stuff, if you learned anything from this episode, please leave us a comment, send us a question, send us, hey, thanks for talking about this. No one ever talks about this. Send us a story. If you have a story about this in the real world, please let us know. We want to share your story to let others know that they're not alone. Yeah. And also leave us a 5-star review, and anywhere you listen to podcasts. That's very, very helpful for us. And share us out, because we can only get to the ears that we get in front of their eyes. So does that make sense?
Yes.
If you're not sharing us, we
I
can't,
had to
they
think
can't,
about that.
they can't listen to us.
Yes, please.
But
Be very
that's
helpful.
That's super helpful. And let us know, go to thediscovery.com/podcast and submit your answers or questions. Because we're going to start doing mailbag. So we had a mailbag from a 7-year-old question.
It was such a good question. And we
So-
really want to get to the place where you guys are involved and active and we're answering things that you have questions about as you're listening to these. So please don't hesitate to drop us a question that we can answer on the podcast, because if you have that question, chances are a lot of other people do too.
Yeah.
So
So
until next time,
let's discover together. Content provided in this podcast provides general information and discussions on various topics related to health, wellness, and medical advancements. However, it is essential to understand that the content provided in this podcast is not intended to be a substitute for professional medical advice, diagnosis, or treatment. The hosts, guests, and contributors are individuals sharing their personal experiences, opinions, and knowledge in their respective fields. While they strive to provide accurate, up-to-date information, medical knowledge is constantly evolving, and the information presented in this podcast may not always reflect the most current research and medical guidelines. It is crucial to consult with a qualified healthcare professional or medical expert for specific medical concerns. Never disregard professional medical advice or delay seeking medical treatment based on the information presented in this podcast. The Discovery Doc podcast encourage listeners to use their own judgment and discretion while implementing any suggestions, recommendations, or lifestyle changes discussed in this episode. Each individual's medical situation is unique and may work for one, may not be suitable or safe for another. The podcast hosts, guests, and contributors are not liable for any direct, indirect, consequential, or incidental damages or harm that may arise from listening or acting upon the information provided in this podcast. Listeners are responsible for their own health decisions and should exercise caution and seek professional guidance when necessary. By listening to this podcast, you acknowledge that you have read, understood, and agreed to this medical disclaimer. If you have any questions or concerns about this medical disclaimer, please consult a qualified healthcare professional.